Welcome to Scene Change, a podcast by the National Federation of the Blind Performing Arts Division. All about equality, opportunity, accessibility, and the arts. Here, you'll learn adaptive techniques from performers in the know. We are changing what it means to be blind, one stage at a time. Thank you for joining us today. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Scene Change. I'm Lizzy Muhammad-Park, your host of the show. Today's episode is Getting the Gig, Holiday Edition. So we've got three amazing guests who can't wait to tell you all about their experiences with holiday performances. First up, we've got Christina Ebersol. Hi, Christina.
Hi.
Next up, we've got Christina Jones, which, that won't be confusing at all. Hey, Christina Jones.
Hi.
And right next to her, we've got Lawrence E. Brown. Hi, Lawrence.
Hello.
It's your first time on the show. Welcome.
Thank you.
So I'd just like to give each of you the chance to introduce yourselves to our audience. Lawrence, you're new here, so why don't we start with you? And just sort of share with us how long you've been doing holiday gigs and what it is that you do as far as performance goes.
Okay, well, as you just said, I'm Lawrence Brown. I am a percussionist primarily, but I also sing, I produce, I rap, I write. And in terms of holiday gigs, I've been doing them as long as I've been a professional musician. I started playing professionally probably about 16 years old. And that started with the Youth Jazz Ensemble doing gigs at airports all the way up to today, where I lead worship at a Methodist church in El Paso, Texas, where I live. And I still play a whole bunch of different types of gigs.
Awesome. And next up, we're going to go with Christina Ebersol. And could you also introduce yourself to our crowd?
Hi. So I am a classical violist, which in my world means all of the nutcrackers and holiday gigs. So I'm really fortunate because I can bring my instrument pretty much wherever I go. So I am fortunate to be able to do holiday parties and infinite cheese and wine tastings and things of that nature, as well as ballets and operas and things like that for all of the holiday seasons. And I've been doing this for the last 9 years. And currently I am a doctoral student at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign.
That's right. And you can hear more about Christina's journey on our September 2021 episode, where she appears with Precious Perez and the amazing professor from the Berklee School of Music, Chi Kim. Last but certainly not least, we have Christina Jones. Could you reintroduce yourself to our audience?
Hi, I'm Christina Jones, and I am a soprano. I'm an opera singer. In terms of holiday gigs, I've been doing that as pretty much, as Lauren said, as long as I've professionally been doing this, which has been about, oh lordy, 15 years, I want to say. That ages me. Anyways, and I do a lot of work I've done a lot of work with churches or choirs. I've done a lot of caroling gigs specifically, or, going out into the community and, caroling for canned foods or, things like that. So that's a lot of what I've done in the past.
Wow. So we've got a plethora of experience, a very wide-ranging experience happening here. I'm very glad that we're going to be viewing holiday gigs, holiday performances from all these different angles. So let's start off with Christina Ebersol. And could you explain to us a little bit more about where you've done holiday performances? And I'm afraid that I may mix up a few of you in terms of your performances. So if I get anything wrong, please just tell me. Now, Christina, I believe you said you've performed sort of nutcracker style things, and that your instrument is mobile and so on and so forth. So you probably have a wide range of places that you performed, right?
Oh yes. Yeah, so one of the biggest things for classical musicians in the holidays is the Nutcracker because the Nutcracker is the holiday show for us. So it usually starts off on Thanksgiving and runs all the way until Christmas. It's usually the ballet performs it and then they have a full pit orchestra and there's at least one showing every weekend, usually 3 to 6 showings every weekend, all the way from Thanksgiving till Christmas. So they always need violas. So the Nutcracker is one of the biggest holiday gigs that you can get as a classical musician.
And where have you performed? I'm assuming maybe what, symphony halls or something of that nature, or
Yeah, so for the Nutcracker specifically, I performed for local theaters. So a lot of times you can get in contact with some of your local ballet theaters. Even the smaller ones will do Nutcracker performances, or if you find your local ballet dance companies, the bigger ones. And then you can also start to pull from if you live in a bigger city and you get the more professional ones, that's where you start to get a little bit more money and a little bit more consistency with performances as well, such as Chicago, St. Louis, because I'm in the Midwest. So you start to pull from there, and you that's when you start to get about 6 shows a week. And then from there, you perform inside the theaters that the ballet troupe actually performs in. So it's usually a big dance theater, and then it has a pit orchestra that you sit inside. So basically, you're in a big hole in the ground, so nobody can see you because they're looking at the dancers. But I mean, that's okay because you still get to play your music.
and then what about outside of the Nutcracker? Where else have you performed for holiday? I believe you told me once something about performing in a coffee shop. Is that right?
Oh yeah. So one of my favorite things to do for the holidays is to find local like mom and pop restaurants that do maybe lunch or coffee shops and get in contact with them. They usually absolutely love to have local musicians come and play for their shops. And so I'll contact them and I'll set up like an hour or two and me and sometimes some of my friends will get together and we'll play just a little holiday gig there. Sometimes we'll make a set list of just some of our favorite pieces, or sometimes we'll just kind of improv it out for fun, just kind of go back and forth, whatever we want to play. And, not only does it let us bring music to the community, but it also helps them out because it keeps people in their store a little bit longer, helps the community out a little bit. That's one of our favorite things to do. And if you find a really good coffee shop or a really good bakery, sometimes they give you free pastries. So it's never a bad thing.
That's always a perk. Awesome. So let's move on to Christina Jones. Would you be able to tell us about some of the various pieces that you performed?
Yes, so a lot of the holiday gigs that I have done in the past have been like caroling with different companies. So a lot of times, it'll be like the Charles Dickens carolers um or some other caroling groups where you go out into like quartets and you get you get costumed up in Victorian garb or other, whatever the company needs you to wear, and you go out and carol. You either go to perform for private parties, or you go out into the community and perform for like shopping malls or things like that. Right now, I'm involved with I'm a resident artist with the local opera company, and we go out into the community and perform uh, different carols. It's different though because it's with an opera company, so sometimes people will want like the greatest hits of opera along with it. So it's odd, but it's fine. I get paid, so I'm not going to complain. And then church gigs, and as well as like like Christina Ebersol was saying, she does a lot of nutcrackers and I do a lot of messiahs around this time of year, so it's like okay.
Wow. So have you in these different shopping malls, etc. Um, would this be a full-on show or would this just be like greatest holiday hits kind of thing?
Greatest holiday hits kind of thing.
Yeah, that's always fun. And how about for you, Lawrence? What type of music are you playing and also where?
For me, my my primary bread and butter is uh, that I'm a worship leader at a church, which means I sing and play drums there, but I'm also responsible for hiring the band, making sure that people get their music. I have some staff that work under me. I work very closely with the sound and tech department at the church. And so a lot of that is Christian Christmas music. Um, there's a good portion of my gigs around this time that come from bars or coffee shops. I play a lot of jazz, and so people are always looking to hear some nice jazz during this time of year. So there are a couple of places around town that I might stop in and play some Christmas tunes or some straight ahead jazz that people want to hear.
And you mentioned something earlier about performing in airports. Is that right?
Yeah, so it's pretty common at a lot of in a lot of cities. It's pretty common in a lot of cities to have either a big band or the opera company or something like that at the airport. I guess that I don't know where that started, but it's something that's occurred. I know El Paso Opera has done things. I live in El Paso, Texas, so that's um, they've done things by the airport, but so have youth big bands or youth orchestras, and I performed in the youth big band.
Now, are these usually indoors or outdoor performances?
So for me, generally they're indoor, but
Mm.
because I live in such a warm place, there are a couple of outlet malls and outdoor malls that have stages and they do have some performances. I haven't done one of those in a while, but they're out there. Absolutely.
I see. Actually, now that you mentioned it, you actually jogged my memory of a time when I was in New Orleans around the holidays and just flying back home. I do remember there being a jazz band indoors, and I don't know why, but at the time I was like just assuming that they were a part of the daily I don't know what the word is
Well,
I'm
every day
looking
is a
for.
holiday in New Orleans. We don't
I
know
know,
that.
right? It's so true,
Yeah.
right? So I was just thinking of like, that they're just there all the time. But now that you mentioned it, I'm like, oh, this is a special, holiday gig. So that's really cool. So now all of our listeners know, when you see these various bands, they are not staples in the airport. That's a special treat. So
A lot of
stop and
times, though,
enjoy.
that's through the city. A lot of times, one of the things is that the city will dump a little more money into those outdoor type of holiday. You might see, I remember playing out by a skating rink one time, and a lot of times that's where that money's coming from.
I used to think that those were buskers, and then I started, I started taking part in those performances as well. So,
And then you
uh,
realize,
yeah,
Yeah, you
then I
learn.
realized that they're actually paid.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
I love that. I love that. So my next question is going to be actually starting with you, Christina. So get ready, Christina Jones. So get ready. It's about how you got these gigs. How did you connect with these various people? Did you call around and make arrangements? Did someone contact you? Was there someone else who knew about you and maybe via word of mouth recommended you? How do you find the holiday performance that you like to do?
So that depends on what it is. A lot of the times that I've been involved with any of the, I think there's only been one time I've actually auditioned for for a group, and it was one of the caroling groups that I had been a part of, um, and even then I think I had heard about them or something on Facebook, or I knew someone who was gonna be a caroler or something. I might have seen an advert. I really don't remember, but I know I emailed the lady I auditioned with her, and someone I knew happened to know her. So so I got put in touch with them that way, and they recommended me. So I auditioned, and she accepted me, and that was a it was a huge moneymaker, but I will say that, getting to the different gigs and things like that was a little bit of a pain. Because you're going to different places every single time. So and at the time I was living in California for this particular group, and it was like some of these places that you had to go out to carol for were like 3 hours away. So it just, you know, I think it just depends on what you're willing to bite off in terms of, you know, where you're willing to work and things like that. In terms of, you know, things like Messiah or whatever, I was either part of the community chorus already, or someone I knew, um, you know, I knew that there was a choir nearby that was going to be doing a Messiah or something, and you start looking, you know, you start asking those questions in like May, June, July kind of thing. And you know, because most places will know, oh yeah, by Christmas time these places will be doing Messiah. So most of that's usually planned. And you could just start asking around. And I've never I you know, it's just you the worst you can hear is no, sorry, we're not interested in, or no, we already have somebody. But I usually just ask, or I just get put in touch with people. It just depends.
So, for example, have you ever had a friend maybe who's in the performance and they know your skills and they kind of like tell you about it, or
Yes,
okay.
absolutely.
I was thinking that that might be the case. Also, thank you for that tip about when to reach out for holiday performances. I didn't even have that as a question, but that's very good for our listeners to know. And how about you, Lawrence? What has your experience been as far as getting gigs? How have you been able to connect with people?
So word of mouth is going to be your best calling card, your best business card. Even if you are in a big city like LA or New York, I find that if you have something to offer, people are going to start looking around for you. And if you can play multiple instruments, even better. That's for sure. The other thing is with jazz gigs, I don't do a lot of gig shopping. In other words, going to bars, coffee shops, and saying, "Hey, I am a drummer, or I am a this, or I'm a that. I have a group. We come in and we do this and that." A lot of people end up doing that. So I have a monthly gig, so that comes up, you know, and I have that during the holidays. But it is really a good idea, and I have done it in the past where if you have someone you trust to get you from different place to place and just start hustling. You know, hey, this is what I do. Drop off a business card or send your, hey, here's my press kit, my EPK, or whatever else that you might have, and just go from restaurant to restaurant, from bar to bar, from club to club. The other thing I would say is if you are comfortable serving in a religious context, whether that's at temple or at you know, a church or what have you, the holidays are your best bet to find a gig, try it out, and if they need you year round, they'll call you back. I got my church gig now where I'm worship leader. I went on just as a drummer. I started not during this holiday season, but during the Easter season. They said, our drummer can't make it Easter Sunday. Can you make it? And I did. And I had a feeling they'd call me back. And sure enough, they did. And I've been there ever since. So that's a really great way to slip into, if you want a steady year-round gig in that kind of context. The holidays is when they're going to be looking for that sort of thing.
I love that tip. The foot in the door policy is just a really good way to see if you like the place and if they like you and if you're a good fit for something in the future. So that's really smart. I like that. And how about you, Christina Ebersol?
So, especially for classical musicians, the holiday gigs are not like your normal symphony position or posted position. So, for symphonic positions, usually they're posted months in advance and there's an audition list and things like that, and a specific application process because most of them are unionized. But for holiday gigs, they usually don't advertise that because it's more about who you know. So, the most important thing about being a classical musician, if you want the big holiday gigs, be it you want to be in the Nutcracker or the Messiah, or you want to play in some holiday group, is just to network as much as you possibly can. So that means that whomever you're playing with now, or wherever you're playing, be it at school or if you're in a local community orchestra, or if you're just gigging around town regularly, just put your best foot forward whenever you can, play your very best, introduce yourself to as many people as you can. If you've got business cards, hand them out. If you have a website, keep it updated. Put new music videos up whenever you have them, like recordings, and make sure your contact information is updated. Because a lot of it will just come from your colleagues who are connected. Because what'll happen is, violists will get sick in the Nutcracker, and they'll be like, hey, we need a violist. And then your colleagues will be like, oh, I happen to know somebody. And they'll put your name out there, and then you'll get the phone call. I ended up getting a call to be a sub for an orchestra specifically that way, was because they were looking for somebody because they had a couple people drop out sick, and my teacher recommended me because she was like, she's reliable and she's good, and if you need somebody, there you go. So now I'm a permanent sub on the list, so if they ever need somebody, they can always call me. So that's a big part of it. And part of that just is, just always put your best foot forward and just always do your very best. And just, even if you're not thrilled with some of the people you're working with, or maybe some of the music you're playing, just always try to present yourself in the most professional and amenable way as possible. Because you never know who's watching, and who you're meeting, or who may be connected to whom in the circle of classical world, because it's way smaller than you think it is. Everybody's connected somehow.
That's so true, especially with specific genres within a city, or within a town. You're certainly going to keep running into the same people. So that's also really good advice, just to keep putting your best foot forward, because you never know who might be able to connect you with something, or honestly, who you might be able to connect with something, and maybe they return the favor later. So these
Absolutely.
these are all really good pieces of advice. So we're going to switch gears, and we're going to talk about something a bit personal, and that is payment. You guys obviously don't need to say any specific numbers if you don't want to, but just to sort of help our listeners gauge how to value themselves. So, um, for one, how do you all determine which holiday gigs you are paid for and which ones you're not paid for? And let's say, for example, if you're paid for all of them today, was that how things started off? How do you make that switch? When is it time to start receiving payment for your performances? And how do you value yourself? How do you determine how much your talent is worth? Is that per hour, per performance? Just, keep doing what you guys are already doing, and give us some good advice for our listeners that will help them in their journey. And Lawrence, we will start with you.
Okay, so I think it's really interesting because I have lived in Texas my whole life. And as you know, not to get super political, but Texas is not a union state. So it's the wild, wild west out here. You have to kind of be on your own. I remember, a picture frame falling on my head at a restaurant gig once and barely, very nearly missing me, and me thinking, oh my gosh, there's no union here to protect me. So it can be a little bit scary if you're living in a non-union state or a right to work state. Uh, it's even more important that you are able to kind of set your value and to, uh, feel out how you're going to make sure you're protected. It's going to be interesting to hear back from our other uh, participants in this discussion, because they are from more union type areas, and I don't have that same sort of experience. So I think for me, I try to do one. I believe that giving back to the community is really important, and I try to take charity as a pillar in my life as often as I can. And so I do one charity gig per quarter, per yearly quarter. And so that doesn't change for the holidays for me. If there's no, I mean, if there's really a great need, and I know that it's really, really going to make some serious difference, I would consider doing more than just the one, perhaps during the holidays, because of the great need and all the causes that are going on during that time. But that's what I do. I try to do one charity gig per quarter, no more. Um, I would say, you know, you have to factor in the amount of time that you're going to practice. For us as blind and low vision individuals, visually impaired, whatever you prefer, we need to think about transportation. So, like for me, where I live, there is not good public transport of any kind. And so, what I did as a drummer is I bought a car, and so when I go to a gig, I tell whoever, hey, this, such and such that might be in the band or whatever, would you mind coming to my house? If I need to take my drums will be loaded. You don't have to use your gas, and then we can all get to where we're going. And I have a wonderful support structure, and I get to work with people who are not only my colleagues but my friends. And so, one of the ways that you can set yourself up to be valued, I think that's really under discussed, is when you can work with people that you like. And as Christina Ebersol just said, if you don't like those people, you need to get over it and work through that, push through it, and put your best foot forward. But if you can, cultivate those relationships that you have, because then you're going to be working with your buddies, and then you're going to value each other more, and then the sound is going to sound better, and then the audience is going to feel that. Other than that, you it's very personal, and I think in LA the money is so different than it is in Nashville, than it is in El Paso, Texas. In El Paso, Texas, people are always trying to get things for less. I live uh 20 minutes away from the border with Ciudad Juarez, Mexico. So it's a different world down here. And we've just gotten to the point where you know people are trying not to take gigs at bars for less than $100, if we really want to put a number on it. I don't want to ramble, so that's all I got.
How about for you, Christina Jones? Has this also been your experience? And also, before we jump into your story, I just have to say I love it when blind people buy cars. I think that that is like the coolest thing ever. I don't have a need for one yet, but I can't wait to buy my own car. Just to walk in the dealership and just be like,
It's
yes, for me.
I didn't even think it was going to be as big a deal as it was. I really didn't. I was like, it's fine. Like, it'll be my thing to get to gigs. But then I was like, this is my car.
Yeah, right. And just, I just
You don't grow up thinking you're going to have that opportunity as a blind
right,
person. But this is the
right,
future we're going into. So,
for
amen to that.
sure. I agree, 100%. So, switching over to Christina Jones now, what has been your experience with deciding whether or not you should be paid and then also valuing yourself?
So I think, okay, so this is different. I kind of was around the London scene and the LA scene for a really long time. Um, and so like my concept of, money in terms of gigs, particularly after the pandemic, has really shifted. However, pre-pandemic, um, pre-pandemic, I would do as much as I could, um, paid in general. If I would take on, I would definitely do my fair share of, um, charity, charity gigs and things like that, because it it doesn't feel right not to, but in general, I think one of the things that I really started working on pre-pandemic was I started really putting a monetary value on my time. For instance, like with practice time, I think it's fair to pay myself $25 per hour, like in terms of like me woodshedding myself in my own practice room, not in the rehearsal space, but just in the practice room. And you know, putting that monetary value really helped me put a monetary, like a price on how much I would charge somebody for a particular gig. Like if somebody said, "What's your quote?" I'd say, "Well, how many rehearsals are there going to be? How many actual things do you need me to physically be there for?" And then I would be able to better better answer them. And came up with like a real baseline price for myself. So, for me, for instance, like if I'm doing a gig that's like, two, like two, maybe one or two rehearsals, a dress rehearsal and one performance, I will not take less than 150. Like I will not go below that at all. Because it's too much of a pain, with rehearsal time plus, travel and things like that. And I do try my best to put that in the in the price point, so to speak. Um, and by 150, I'm talking about like for like maybe a couple of pieces. I'm not talking for the entire hour, or hour and a half, or whatever the performance time is, because that would be way too low if that were the case. But in general, I started really thinking out, okay, this is how much I should expect, this is how little I should expect. And asking local musicians to that area, or people who I know who have performed with that group or whatever, how much do they pay? And I think
Mhm.
we have a real, like, weird relationship with money in terms of, musicians. We really should, I believe, talk about money really, really openly, because I think it will help to even out the playing field, for one. But it will help us, because most of us are not in a unionized, um either area, or we're not in a union. It's either something we don't care to be part of, or there are plenty of gigs out there that are non-union that we should be able to mess with. And I think we are a little bit too gun shy about that kind of subject. But I will talk about money. um but it depends on the gig. Like I said, like, if it's like a few pieces here and there, then I will usually not take less than 150. Like, especially if it's like minimal practice time or whatever. If I'm not doing any practice time and someone can give me a ride, then give me $100, and I'll be happy. But it just depends. Like, if I'm doing a Messiah, like if I'm a soloist for a Messiah, I'm gonna expect anywhere between $600 and $1,500. So it just depends on what I'm doing.
For our listeners who don't know what she means by a messiah, she's not talking about somebody to save her from destruction. She's talking about Handel's Messiah. Handel is a great composer, so Handel's Messiah, just in case.
It's really good. You should definitely look it up if you haven't heard of it. Just an excellent piece with really good music in it. So okay, the both of you have discussed like how to determine payment, but Christina Ebersol, I'm going to change the question ever so slightly for you because I'd like to know what about the moment? I mean, was there ever a time when you didn't get paid for performing? And then at what point did you say, I'm a professional, I should be paid? You know what I mean? Um, and and so on and so forth. You know what I mean? So what does that sort of leap look like?
Yes, I do know what you mean. So Christina Jones brought up this really interesting idea that we don't talk about money enough, and it's very true. And I wish that we would start talking about it day one, when we decide to go into music, but for some reason we don't. But especially in classical music, and I'm sure jazz musicians and popular musicians probably get this as well, but especially early on, when you start your career, you get a lot of but you're getting paid in exposure. It's You can put it on your resume. um but just think of the contacts you'll make, and that's really really true in some instances, and maybe early on in your career. And I did that for quite a few years. There was a lot of times when I took gigs, especially in the first probably 3 or 4 years of performing, so like 2015 to 2019, where I took every opportunity that possibly came my way that I could possibly do, and they were like, well, a good experience and it'll look good on your resume. And I was like, yes, absolutely, it will look good on my resume. And then there comes a certain point in time when you have to start looking at a couple different factors. First of all, you sit down and you look at your updated resume and you're like, is this a resume that I am proud of? Is this a resume that, can compete with my colleagues? Is this a resume that I can put forth to the jobs that I'm interested in, to the gigs that I'm interested in, and can be competitive in the within everybody else that's applying for it, etc. If the answer is yes, then that means it's time to start getting paid for your work. The second is, have I learned from my experiences? Have I grown as a musician? Am I to a point now where artistically, musically, I can put myself out there more readily, more successfully, more efficiently than I could before? The answer is yes, it's time to start getting paid. And then the third is also, once you start to get more experience, once you start to get degrees, once you start to, start getting concerts under your belt, your performance resume starts to build. You need to start getting paid, because it's if you start allowing people to pay you in just experience, not only are you devaluing yourself, but you're making it more difficult for future you to get paid, because they're just going to say, well, you have a master's degree or a doctoral degree and all of these concerts, but you didn't get paid for the last thing you did. So, why am I going to pay you now? So there comes a certain point in time when you're just like, I've worked 9 years, I'm a doctoral student, I have all of these things on my resume, I've performed all these concerts, I've won these awards and honors, these scholarships, I deserve to get paid. So when it comes to that, there just comes a point in time when you have to say, professionally and artistically and musically, it is time for me to put my foot down. So what that looked like for me was, after my first 4 years, I started to just kind of slowly ask for money, but I wasn't really consistent about how much I was asking for. I am not part of a union. I've looked into it. And a union is for some people and not for some people. That is definitely an individual choice. Some places have great unions and some don't. So for me, it was just not an opportunity that I was really interested in, but they are really great for some people. But so I am not a part of a union, but so I would just like take whatever somebody would be like, well, we're offering $50 or $100, and I was like, okay, that's fine. And then as I was graduating with my master's degree, I got an opportunity to play a really big professional gig, and they asked me if I had um, numbers for how much I would charge. And of course, I had no idea. And I was like, well, I will get those for you. So I spent about a week talking to my professors and talking to my husband and just trying to think through my own personal experiences, and I came up with a spreadsheet of like all of the different services I offer, from my body mapping lessons to my accessibility course to private lessons to performances, be it solo performance or a chamber performance or a performance with pianists, because that'll pay different because I have to pay my pianist as well. And then I put a numeric value on how much I believe, based upon how many hours I have to put in, paying the people who are responsible for helping me as well as maybe making just a little bit of profit off the top, because it's nice to be able to, make some money in the end. And then that's updated every couple of months. I go back through it and see if it needs to be updated, because your experiences change as you go along. And then for any really big, for little gigs, I'm still really flexible, just depending on the situation. I do one big charity concert a year where I try to get donations, and I usually apply it towards one specific organization a year. But when it comes to big performances, I do have a contract for performance that outlines exactly how much I'm getting paid, how I'm getting paid, when I get paid, and both I and the people hiring me sign that. That way it protects both of us. So that way I can't just not show up and get paid, and that way they can't just not pay me, because there are plenty of instances of my colleagues who have been hired for gigs before who have not gotten paid, and we don't want that to happen. So
Oh no, not at all. That's awful. Um, Now, a lot of what Christina Ebersole just talked about was confidence. That everything that was mentioned requires um, the belief in yourself that you are worth that much. So, Christina Jones, I'd like to ask you, do you give yourself any sort of a pep talk or, maybe chat with friends or something like that before either reaching out for gigs or discussing payment, anything like that? What do you do to maintain your level of confidence going into these different situations?
Oh, goodness. If I do, I'm not completely aware of it. I think one of the things that I definitely do is I will talk to friends and say, hey, do you think it's fair for me to ask this much money? Or hey, how much do you think is fair for me to ask? One of the two. Um, and I think, for me, I still work with a private voice teacher. Um, and frankly, he's doing a lot right now to rebuild my confidence because I lost a lot of it. Um, for various reasons. I think, part of it was pandemic, but part of it was just being just being pushed around a lot in this industry, and this industry can be a bit brutal. So I think, at one point I was taking on, the cost of living in LA is high. It's obscenely high. And so I was taking on a lot of jobs and I was not being paid a lot. And I think part of it was just, at that time I had the mentality of, oh, okay, I need to take on whatever I can get because I need to pay my bills. I need to pay rent. And so for me, I really, really got beat down by that over a period of time. And now I'm just getting my confidence back. And I think now I've really, really established a rule for myself to only take on gigs that make me feel fulfilled in one way, shape, or form, whether it's going to be, monetarily fulfilling, and if it's not musically or whatever else fulfilling, and if it's just the money, then it has to be for an incredibly brief period of time, you know. And then the other thing too is if it's of artistic or personal interest to me, I'll take the gig. If it's going to be of of value to me, where I really enjoy working with the people, then I take the gig. So I've grabbed those rules for myself, and and I make sure that I'm doing things that make me happy and make me feel fulfilled. And hopefully that's gonna eventually build my confidence back. So I might not have been the best person to get that question, but it's just, I think the main thing is making not so much confidence building, although that's part of it, but you know just just surrounding yourself with people that aren't going to make you feel awful about yourself and make you feel devalued, whether it be through, because of lack of monetary compensation that you're getting, or whatever else. So I think I've just been trying to be really mindful about how I've been going back into this field for myself.
That's really important. And Christina Ebersole, how about you? When you look at your resume, what keeps you from saying, "Oh, but maybe I don't stack up to my peers"? How do you stay confident in this industry?
First off, Christina Jones, I 100% am with you, but also you're a queen. So just,
True.
just you're fierce, you're amazing. So, yeah, it can be a really grueling and tough field to be in. Especially there are oftentimes a lot of things stacked against us as blind, visually impaired musicians. And I struggled a lot with my confidence early on because I wanted to do absolutely everything that my visual peers were doing. I wanted to take the last minute gigs at all of the weddings and the last minute gigs where they went to go sight read an entire musical theater piece, and then that's just not always something that's doable for me. And then that was really hard for my confidence. But what helped with me is truthfully just time. The more time I spend on my craft and the more time I spend with my instrument and the more time I spend with my colleagues, the more I realize it's not about me against them or me against anyone else. It's just, we're all coming together to do this really beautiful thing, and to create this beautiful thing that's going out into the world. And I may not always get to be a part of every single project I want to be, but the projects that I am a part of, I know that I am making a contribution and a meaningful contribution. And so whenever I get an email or whenever I get accepted into a project or asked to be a part of a project, it's always in the back of my mind. The first thing is to be like, oh my God, I don't deserve that. But I've learned um, to identify that voice, to isolate the voice and tell myself, I worked hard for this. I have done the work for this. I am where I'm supposed to be. Shut down the voice because our brains are our biggest liars and their biggest critics. And just to accept that, as long as you continue to work hard and as long as you continue to love what you're doing and put the time in, that you do deserve it. And just go out there and put your best foot forward every time. And you're not going to be a rock star every day. That's what my husband always tells me. Like, I have my bad days and I come home all like teary eyed and I'm just like, oh my God, I'm so terrible. I can't believe I decided to do this with my life. I should have been an accountant. And then he's just like, well, you can't be a rock star every day. And so I get my pity party day. And then the next day I put my boots back on and I go back out there and I do it all over again. And you're not going to be, a confidence rock star every day. And there are going to be plenty of people out there who try to tear you down or who tell you you can't do it or who try to make you feel bad. But you know what? They are not in your shoes and they don't pay your bills, so they don't matter. So just go out there and do you.
That's so true. Oh my gosh, I love that. And Lawrence, what do you do? What do you believe or hold on to help yourself through the difficulties?
Well, I always look to peers and colleagues that are older than me, uh, who appreciate what I do, whether that's an old professor or someone like Christina Jones who is has had some experiences that I can't fathom because I haven't had them. And those are the people that say, keep on going or keep on pushing. Um, I think that's a good place to start, just so you can try to avoid some of that imposter syndrome that we often get when we decide when somebody, if you play music and somebody told you, hey, you're pretty good at that, and then you run with that, and then you know competitions and concerts and records and whatever else later, you're like, am I really though? Like, am I supposed to be? But that's when you reach back to your support group and your friends, and you kind of get yourself back on track. Also, what Christina Eversole really said earlier really resonated with me because about wanting to do all the gigs. Oh man, well there's this last minute wedding gig.
Yeah.
There's this last minute 2 hour wedding gig, and well, how are you gonna get there? How are you gonna get your drums there? Well, I don't know. Well, and so then it's like, well, if they're not out there saying, hey, I'm willing to help you, the person hiring you for the gig that is. I remember, I have a colleague who hired me for a blues gig, and I didn't really want to do the blues gig. I think he plays well, and his band is cool and everything, but it was a really long gig, but it was really super, super, super close to my house. So I can make it there. And he said, I said, I don't think I can do it. He says, well, it's right next to you. I said, well, I just don't think I can do it. He says, well, what's keeping you from doing the gig? I said, well, first of all, I need a ride. Second of all, the money is too low. And he said, well, I can't give you a ride there because I have something going on before. But if I get you a ride home afterwards and I up your pay to X amount of dollars, can you do it? That's somebody who's willing to meet you halfway, or to do something to make sure that you can accomplish what they want you to accomplish and provide the service that they want you to provide. That's somebody that's willing to meet you halfway. But when somebody, when you've been working with someone in the studio and then they say, oh, we don't have budget for you to eat lunch anymore. You're going to be on your own for lunch. It's like, well, wait a second. You want me in the studio for 6 hours, but now I have to buy my lunch also? No. The answer is no. And so those are very clear, and a lot of times here in El Paso, we are a burgeoning music city. We are a place where I know many people who have just started their music school or just started their studio, and there's a lot of that. There's a lot of talent and not enough resources, and so sometimes that money flows around in a circle. Sometimes, I might pay a friend of mine uh, to do a record date for me, and then that same money comes back to me because he had to pay me for a gig the next week. so understanding that and being okay with that, as long as you're with people that you trust and with friends and everybody's able to pay their bills and nobody's starving, um, then that's all you can hope for. Obviously, there's times when I overbook myself or I'm trying to figure out how to say yes, and I just wish I could wave my wand and have some robot manager that could take care of everything for me. That isn't the case. So we have to do our grunt work, and we have to be in the trenches with people that we trust. The other thing that will build confidence, I think, is consistency. Because I know so many musicians whose confidence took a nosedive beneath the surface of the earth during the pandemic. And if I didn't have a consistent gig, which for me was my church gig, I would have had that same feeling. And I did have those feelings for the first couple of months when we weren't doing live music in person at the church and stuff like that. So I think those consistent gigs, even if this is kind of back to the payment thing, but even if they pay you a little less, as long as they're treating you well and it's something consistent, you have to think about the long-term benefit. At a certain point, if I get a consistent gig with some friends of mine at a coffee shop that I like, where they're not rude and they offer us a coffee and they're able to pay as much as they can possibly pay, but it's not a giant business or whatever, that's free practice time for me. Practicing with my friends in a real life social setting, not in the practice room, because we have to also remember that as blind folks, we already have a degree of isolation. As musicians, oh boy, especially if you're a university type of musician, you're not working just off of street knowledge, and then you're expected to spend a lot of time in the practice room and a lot of time away from people. So a big confidence builder in those situations would be taking gigs in social situations where you feel comfortable for one reason or another, whether that's that triangle that Christina Jones talked about earlier, the people or the musical experience or the money, and picking those two out of those three legs on that triangle, or sides on that triangle.
I love that. That's so good for our listeners to hear and to think about. Um, just all there's just so many different ways to value yourself, and I think that having these various perspectives is really going to be really helpful because each listener is going to be different. So they're probably going to have one or a couple or maybe even all three of you who they agree with, whether it be in one area or another. But so far, this has been an excellent episode with just so much knowledge being dropped left and right. So my final question is a bit more just creative and it's just out there. So you guys can answer in any order, just jump right in. And also feel free to comment on each other's ideas as well, because it's an interesting question. So Hopkins, the Peabody Institute at Johns Hopkins, has been taking classical or orchestral students and putting them in libraries in local communities. This is all in an attempt to make classical music more accessible. So with with Christina Jones doing opera, Christina Ebersole in the classical instrument arena, and then with Lawrence in the worship area and jazz and so on. Each of you sort of have these styles of music that maybe have not been the most accessible to everyone, but at the same time, um, it's now becoming a situation. When I say accessibility here, I just mean to the general public. I know there's accessibility for the blind, but there's also accessibility just with the everyday person listening to classical music or listening to worship music or jazz or fill in the blank. The question is, do any of you have ideas for creative holiday gigs, creative holiday performances? It could be a starting point for them to think of various ways to perform. So just have fun with this question. I just kind of want to see where it goes.
Who's going first?
I should never tell Christina Jones to have fun, ever. She'll just laugh.
That's true. This is very true.
She'll crack up.
So there are two really fun things that I always really like to do. One of them, and you can do this with literally any type of music, and you can do it at a library, you can do it at a school, or you can do it at a church, is get some music friends together and your favorite kids book or kids story and create like a musical narrative to it. So we did one the other, like it was 2 years ago, and I just remember, I don't remember what the story was, but I remember I had a cow in it because I had to make the sound of a cow mooing on my viola, which was the best sound I've ever made on my viola ever. So basically, we all made different sounds of cows and chickens and animals on our instruments as one of our friends read this book aloud to the kids, and it was a lot of fun. Um, and then another idea that I like to do around the holidays, and you can use this as a monetary thing, or you can use this as presents, even just for fun, is you can buy these little recorders on Amazon, even. They're the ones that you can buy at like Build-A-Bear, and you can buy 10-second ones or 20-second ones. They're really cheap. You can buy like two for $10 or something. And record you or your friends playing whatever you want. It can be a holiday song, or it can be um you can take commissions of someone's favorite, like let's say, somebody commissions you to play a cover of their wedding song or something, and you record this little 20-second clip, and then you can put it inside a teddy bear or put it inside a pillow or something, and there you go. You have a custom made Christmas gift.
Oh, I love that. We did that one year for my dad for Father's Day. It was in a card for him. So I love that
Oh,
idea. It's so cute. Yeah.
I always try to do something like that because everybody wants to send cookies, but you can only eat
Uh-huh.
so many cookies for Christmas.
So true. So true.
Um, I would say the most creative thing that you can do, or the one of the best things that you could do in terms of reaching out into the community is during the holidays would be, I think it's really important that people who, if we're talking about accessibility of music, we're thinking about places like retirement homes, uh, prisons. Those are people who are truly cut off from the outside world. Hospitals. Those are the three that I go to, and I know it's as plain old Jane old as cheeseburgers and fries. But in my opinion, that's, if you're talking about accessibility of holiday music, you're not thinking about the person passing by the beautifully lit shop with the buster on
Right.
the corner, or the community, the city funded Christmas steel drum concert across the street at this expensive outlet mall. I'm thinking about somebody who is behind bars and has to be away from their family, or an older person who needs 24 hour a day care and will not be able to leave that nursing home to get to the mall, or whatever the case is. So that's always where my heart goes.
I absolutely love that. When I was an undergrad, our a cappella group every year for Christmas would go and sing at the retirement center. And let me tell you, they loved it. Like they would come and they would be, just like so into it. So yeah, 100% bringing music to the people who cannot go out and get it, or maybe they can, but maybe just not on their terms. So that's really a good idea.
Well, and to add to that, don't forget about the VA hospitals and the VFWs too,
That's
Hmm.
because
right.
they absolutely love that. We played
Yes.
for the VA hospital last spring, and not only did the VA, like the veterans, come down. I'm an Army veteran myself and got all kinds of smack from the Marines, but not only did the veterans come down, but the doctors and nurses loved it too. And they talked about how pre-pandemic they had a musical group come through and it was musicians on call, but the pandemic, they all scattered. And so yeah, that's 100% Lawrence. I'm on board with that one.
Hmm.
Mhm. One of the things that I personally really enjoy doing that I've done with a bunch of friends is, we'll put some flyers together and stuff like that, and then we'll go around different neighborhoods and drop these flyers off in their mailbox, and we'll specifically say we'll come to your house on Christmas Carol for canned food. So we're not asking for payment really, but we are asking for canned goods. And then what we do is we go and take those canned goods to like a homeless shelter or a food bank or something. um and that's I think one of the things that I have really enjoyed personally, because it's really you know quick. It takes like not too much preparation, and like it's something that I've done with there was a church that I used to sing for in the LA area, and we did like a lot of like interfaith stuff. So we it was really cool because we it was like the Christian community, the Jewish community, and the Islamic community, and we'd come together and we'd sing different music from our own religious traditions, and we would go door to door and sing together, and that was really meaningful.
I love that. How many songs would you guys sing per household? Just one or?
um it was like three or four,
I love
maybe.
that.
It
Yeah.
depended on how busy they were, and a lot of it was interesting too, because sometimes people wouldn't necessarily be home to have carolers, and they wouldn't necessarily want to have carolers, so they would leave this giant box of canned food outside, and it with a note attached with with the
Please no
with
singing.
the with the with the flyer that we had like sent to everybody. And so we'd take these canned goods and we would put them in our giant wagon that we would be dragging around, and and we'd we'd take that with us and donate it later. And it was really I always love doing that, and I want to do that again soon. I miss it.
And just to add to that, that goes
Mhm.
back to the whole confidence building thing. If you want to rebuild your confidence, go and perform for some people who really appreciate it, and
Mm,
you will be so filled up you won't even know what to do with it all.
I love that.
That's true.
It's a
It's
great
true.
idea.
It's true. Because I
Hmm.
think part of it too is like in the classical world, at least for me in my experience, like I think it's really easy to get bogged down by like comparing yourself to the other people, because you're like bluntly, we're never gonna compare to like to the professional, like, and by the professionals, I'm talking about like the real high rollers there
Like
that are
Beyonce?
sorry. Yeah,
Like
Beyonce.
exactly.
Beyonce?
Like Beyonce. Like I'm not Beyonce. That's not gonna happen. But also Beyonce's not me. So that I'm just saying,
That's great.
but so it's just it's we're not going to be pulling in the same kind of money for one, but we're not going to have the same kind of audiences. We're not, but a lot of times, like I know for me, I think one of the things that really bogged me down in the past was that whenever I'd go to these performances, I there was a part of me, and frankly, opera singers in particular, oh my gosh, opera singers can be so vicious, particularly sopranos. Like they're known for being incredibly catty and jerks, frankly. And it was really like I remember going out to different competitions and things like that, and I never had a great experience because there was always someone who would make like a really rude comment, and I would just be like, oh my gosh, because it would really, really catch me off guard. And so, I hate, as a result, I really hate competitions. But but it's really easy to get yourself into this mindset of, I'm not measuring up, or I'm not doing how I should be doing, or whatever. And or you kind of, there's sometimes you can feel like, the audience members or whatever can be feeling like, oh well, they're not so and so, but they did okay. And it's like, well, okay, thanks. But and that's not, first of all, that's not necessarily true. That's my insecurity talking, and that is true for some audience members, but it's not true for the great majority. But also, I think one of the things that I really loved, has recently been going to retirement homes and things like that. And those audience members genuinely really just appreciate having someone in their face singing at them,
Mm-hmm.
and it's some of my most engaged and like emotionally involved performances have been in retirement homes.
That's right.
Because like you can feel like the love and the support and that positivity from your audience members, and the genuine appreciation. You're not stuck in your head. You're in a place where you're giving back. You're giving that energy back to that audience member.
I 100% agree with that. And I think that that's something that's very good for our listeners to hear and really, have that sink in. So thank you all so much for your participation, for your amazing advice. Before I let you all go, let's just take a quick moment to share our social media. Lawrence, since you're new, I'll let you go first.
So you can find me on Facebook, either under Lawrence Brown, Roman numeral 3, or Lawrence E. Brown, Roman numeral 3. Those are both of my profiles there. And then on Instagram, at Lawrence Brown, Roman numeral 3, all together. And that's pretty much where I'm at.
Awesome. And Christina Jones, I forgot to mention at the beginning that you can learn more about Christina Jones on our March episode where she discusses her experience starring in the musical. I'm gonna say this wrong. Is it Ajonta?
The opera Yolanta.
Yeah, that's it, Yolanta.
That's
So
all
you can
right.
learn more about Christina there. And if you'd like to follow her or get in contact with her, how can I do that, Christina?
You can either go to my website, which is www.theblindsoprano.com, or you can find me on Twitter, which I never update, Instagram, which I never update, and and Facebook I do update, but and YouTube I do update at The Blind Soprano.
Awesome. And Christina Ebersol, how can our listeners get in contact with you?
Yeah, so you can reach out to me on my website, www.christinaebersol.com. You can find me on Facebook, Christina Ebersol Van Syak. I know I got married like forever ago, and I'm still working on the whole name change thing. You can get me on Instagram at Christina Ebersol _ Viola. Or you can just, stalk me some other way.
Can you spell your last name?
B is in Bravo, Erssohl.
Perfect. Just so everybody is reaching out to the correct Christina Ebersol. That's all we have for everyone today. Thank you so much for joining us, the three of you. Thank you to some of our listeners for these amazing questions. These were not all mine this time. And thank you to the listeners just for tuning in. This has been another episode of Scene Change.
I'm Caitlin McIntyre, president of the National Federation of the Blind Performing Arts Division. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Scene Change. If you like what you heard, be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and visit our website at nfb-pad.org. There you'll find links to our social media, membership, and resources for blind performers. Thanks to everyone who makes this show happen. Scene Change is produced by Shane Lowe, Joe Schuneman, Precious Perez, Chris Nussbaum, Seyoon Choi, and Aaron Jordan, with music by Ryan Strunk and Tom Page. Remember, you can be the performer you want. Blindness is not what holds you back. We'll see you next time.